Welcome to part 3 of Living with Saci, chapter 3, The Lover, 7th of December 2008. Teresa lay on her back on the bed with her legs apart, looking at the bald patch of the doctor, who stared between her knees at her disappointing cervix. Between contractions, she looked at the man beside her and wondered how she had arrived at this point in her life. He used to come into the coffee shop in Waterloo Station, where she had been working. He spoke undecipherable sentences to her that she was sure must have been delightful, but that, after 2 weeks in the country, she could not understand. Of course, she was not the one taking the orders. One of her fellow Brazilians on the tills would hand her a cup and tell her what to make. She knew how to make the drinks, because she had it all explained to her in Portuguese. But the conversations which went on with her friends on the tills and the customers remained alien to her. It must have been about 6 months during which she began to understand his advances, advances, until, after rejecting him on at least 3 occasions, she agreed to go with him on a date. She learned how he had become addicted to caffeine in the process of finding opportunities to speak with her over the counter, and that his name was William, and that he was a bit of an environmentalist. He invited her to visit his environmental collective, the Gaia Community, where Teresa met a couple of people sporting hairstyles, the likes of which she had never seen before, from blankets of dreadlocks collected up under knitwear to shaven heads. In between her shifts at the coffee shop, occasional cleaning jobs, and even more occasional visits to the language school that were meant to be the reason for her visa, she would visit William at the collective, where she began to volunteer. William was a paid member of staff, paid through national lottery funding, and he would joke on the rare occasion he bought a lottery ticket that he was paying himself. Within another 6 months, Teresa had moved out of her flat share in Harlesden and into William's flat in Stockwell, where he proposed to her, and she accepted. And within 6 more, she had discovered that she had become pregnant. Still fearing the Catholicism of her parents, she arranged the wedding and executed in extreme haste, so that the bump would not show. Less than 6 months later, Teresa found herself in an NHS ward, being told by a balding man that her cervix was too stubborn to dilate enough, and that they would have to do something. Chapter 4, The Fiancé's Family, 13th of January 2016. Teresa found the cemetery of very dull pace. They were all there, the sister, the mother, the father, the brother, all teary. Some of them must have travelled through the night to be there. Teresa hugged them all and made all the right noises, but she was surprised to find that she didn't want to cry in the slightest. It made her feel guilty, and with that sensation alone, she was able to maintain a solemn countenance. Her overriding emotion was one of embarrassment. She was conscious that Felipe's family might be blaming her for his demise, and this knowledge made her feel uncomfortable. She tried to stay out of the way as much as possible, while at the same time seeking to look interested in proceedings, which she considered a pointless exercise and, in fact, a complete waste of everyone's time. Even though Teresa believed in the afterlife, she also believed that now he was dead, Felipe was no more than a fleshy sack of body parts. The Felipe that Teresa had known, loved, and hated had departed before she'd arrived home, and this ceremony to bury a bag of molecules irritated Teresa just as much as everything in her world. Teresa was suffering, but not from grief. She would suffer her grief on her own, away from these people. She watched Felipe's mother, Lucretia, bawling her eyes out like the drama queen she was. Teresa wondered whether she had displayed the same extremes of emotion earlier this morning when she had selected the designer clothes she'd chosen to wear for the funeral. Felipe's father, José, sat at the side trying not to notice the antics of his wife. The fact that he had one eye on the other being a glass replacement for the eye he had lost in a strange accident in the operating theatre, made the job of ignoring his wife easier. The freakishness of the situation was that he had been a surgeon operating at the time. The accident had led to retirement and the opportunities for his wife and children to spend the rest of his settlement claim for the very expensive private hospital, which did not want the very particular clients to hear the faulty operating theatre equipment had almost blinded one of their leading surgeons. Teresa felt sorry for José, not least for having to live with Lucretia for so long. He was a broken man, long accustomed to his wife telling him what to do. Lucretia had selected José's clothes too, judging by the uncomfortable manner in which he sat in them. Felipe's sister, Patricia, was doing her best to be a young Lucretia, going through exaggerated motions of grief, embracing her mother, and doing her best to let everyone know that she cared. You didn't care very much when he was alive, thought Teresa. Then there was Felipe's brother, who had managed to select a wife as ferocious as his mother, so that he could be as henpecked as his father. His wife, Isadora, sat at his side, critical. Just the expression on her face, her half-closed eyes, told everyone that, had she been in charge today, she would have done things better. Their child Carlos sat fiddling with his phone. Teresa remembered how much Felipe had loved this ungrateful slob of a teenager who texted his friends while Felipe waited for burial as he lay in a wooden box. Teresa looked at Carlos and thought about her daughter, thousands of miles away. She thought about the circumstances that separated them, and then felt guilty for criticizing Felipe's relatives when, in truth, the thought uppermost in her mind at the moment was whether she could get something to eat and drink. Teresa knew there was a bakery across the street, but was well aware she would be unable to leave. She was waiting for it all to end. Everyone was very polite to her, but she kept thinking about how they blamed her, even though Teresa knew it wasn't all her fault, and they had just as much a share in this as her. While Lucretia was taking a break from her theatrics, Teresa felt she should spend some time at the coffin, for appearance's sake, if nothing else. She approached the large box and looked over at Felipe. She had been avoiding looking at him all this time. The undertakers had done their best to cover the marks where the fish had started to eat him. The coffin was open, and Felipe lay with his arms folded across his chest and a crucifix, which Teresa knew he would have hated, placed over his hands. Just as she was leaning over to take a closer look, Felipe sat bolt upright. Teresa let out a yelp of terror, and the rest of the gathering gasped in unison. "Water!" Felipe said, and then slumped back into the coffin. "He wants water. Get him some water," Teresa blurted. "It's a miracle. Praise the Lord," Felipe's mother declared, her arms raised as she rushed over to the coffin, pushing Teresa out of the way. José handed Teresa a bottle of water, but Felipe was lying lifeless in the coffin, and no attempt, Teresa or Lucretia made, would revive him. "Somebody get a doctor," Teresa pleaded, searching the astonished faces that surrounded her. The doctor came, but could find no signs of life, nor could he explain Felipe's apparent brief return to life. After an afternoon of argument, speculation, and verification, they agreed that Felipe was dead, and that they should bury him without further disruption to the cemetery's already disturbed schedule. Teresa stared at the coffin, unable to process the events she had just witnessed. It was as if they had never happened. Trapped air, she was told, was responsible, and the request for water a fantasy devised by her already overtaxed brain. But Teresa had known what she had witnessed and felt an overwhelming sense of frustration as they lowered the coffin into the family crypt. Teresa wondered how much longer it would be before she could go home. She tried suggesting that she could go and get a bus, but Selma was having none of it, and Teresa did not want to appear rude again. Selma walked to her car, and Teresa found herself staring back at the cemetery from the metal entrance gates. "Teresa! Teresa!" Selma shouted to her. "Teresa! Teresa!" Selma was next to her, banging on the entrance gates, trying to get her attention. If you'd like to hear part 4 of Living with Saci, then don't forget to subscribe. Is it here or over here? I don't know. And then you'll get a notification that'll tell you when I've posted it. You can also listen to readings of my other books, The Astonishing Anniversaries of James and Dave, and when the well runs dry. And if you like this reading, then please give it a thumbs up. Thanks very much. See you next time.